is to select the employees who are the right employees, the right fit for the right job. So this is the major job of HRs. How to select, what are the process to be followed, what are the stages in this selection process. We are going to discuss it further. So as we know, usually we use the term selection and recruitment interchangeably, right? Instead of selection, we use it as recruitment process, and instead of recruitment, we use selection. Even though we use them interchangeably, they are very much different. So first of all, in order to understand selection, it is important for us to know the differences between selection and recruitment. So let us deal with these differences. So when we are talking about recruitment, right, recruitment is generally considered as positive approach, because what happens is that in recruitment we are only concerned with having contact with the employees. As in recruitment, we would be establishing some advertisement given of these job posts related to the job, wherein we give advertisement, and we invite as many applicants as possible. We are not as in we are not concerned with who are applying, who are all giving applications, but we are only concerned with taking in applications. Whereas when we are talking about selection process, it is mostly considered as negative approach, because in selection what happens is that after getting applications and all, we would be screening them. If the applications are not according to the eligibility criteria, or they are not fulfilling the eligibility criteria, we would be screening them out. So here in selection, we are solely focusing on rejecting the unfulfilled candidates, right? So when recruitment, it is only solely focused on inviting the applications, getting in contact with the candidates, etc. So it is termed as positive approach, wherein selection is the negative approach. Before selection, recruitment happens. After the recruitment, only selection follows. After we get applications in recruitment, there are no hurdles, because we are not screening them out. We are not using any different types of test in order to see whether the candidate is fulfilling the eligibility criteria or not. But in selection, what happens is that it follows the recruitment process. After we get all the applications, then we start screening them, then we would be going for different types of tests, then for interview, and then the process follows, right? So there are not much hurdles in recruitment process, but whereas in selection there are many hurdles to pass in order to get selected. So it proceeds selection, and selection follows recruitment. And also, as we are only taking in applications, it is not very much costly, right? There is not much to spend. But when we are talking about selection, it is an expensive method, because what happens, we have to look for the medium in which the interview has to be conducted, the test materials, or else the back for the background verification, we would be using many different references, right? So for all that, it is an expensive method, wherein we have to keep certain cost for all that. And also in recruitment, in order to receive applications, we would be having a time period. Within that time period, we would be receiving the application. So that is very much less time consuming. Whereas for selection, for screening, we would be taking particular time. Then for test, we would be taking particular time. Then interview. So it would be taking some 1 month to 2 months for the final offer letter to offer the job to the candidate. So it is time consuming. Selection is time consuming. So I hope you understood the differences between recruitment and selection.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So as we know, selection includes a series of process and stages, wherein we would be moving from one stage to other stage. So before going to that, we would be, before learning what are the methods we would be using, who all will be selected, we would be seeing the process of selection. So the process of selection, mainly the process of selection is divided into three important stages, which include initial selection, substantive selection, and contingent selection. So before initial selection, after the recruitment process wherein we receive the applications from different applicants, then we would be, after recruitment, we would be going for initial selection. In this stage, we have different stages which include checking the application forms, screening, background checks, etc. will be done. So this is about initial selection. I mean, just screening the applications, whether the applications are fulfilling the eligibility criteria or not. In applications form, what we see is that whether they are fulfilling eligibility criteria, out of them, whom we have to move forward or who would be rejected, everything would be dealt in the application phase. Then we would be in this phase, there would also be background checks, as in who referred them, from where they are coming. Mostly background checks won't be happening in initial selection, but they would be happening in contingent selection. But in some of the organizations, it might be happening in initial selection, wherein they would be checking from where the candidate has come from, what are his the previous employment details, whether they can contact the previous organizations where they have worked, so that they would be knowing about the candidate. Then after the basic qualifications have been met, as in the candidate are fulfilling the eligibility criteria, then we would be moving to substantive selection. So this stage is mostly called as heart of the selection process. Why? Because in this stage, we would be knowing who is the best qualified candidate in order for this job, right? So before even giving advertisement also, we would be doing job analysis. When we are talking about job analysis, what happens is that we would be looking for who are eligible for this job, what would be the eligibility criteria, who can do this job, what are the skills and abilities required for that job, or for example, if there should be any experience required or not. So we would be doing analysis of the job. After analysis of the job is done, then we would be giving advertisement. When we are giving advertisement, we would be receiving applications. After applications are received, we would be going for initial selection. Then after initial selection, we are coming for substantive selection, wherein this is the heart of the selection process. In this, what happens is that we are concerned with, we use different types of tests, and also the interview comes in this substantive selection. When we are talking about tests, right? So there can be written tests, proficiency tests, psychological tests, performance simulation tests. So when there are, for example, if there are large number of applicants for a job, for example, if there are the number of posts are some 50, but the applications are some 10,000 or something. So if there are more number of application, in such situations, what we do is that we would be going for tests. So we would be giving the applicants test, and out of that applicants who are qualified, then we would be moving that candidates to the next level, that is interview. In interview also, there are many different kinds, as you know, structured interview, unstructured interview, formal interview, informal interview, and also many different types. Talking about different tests and different interviews, we would be talking more detailed about them in the methods of selection. Now, after these tests and interviews are done, we would be getting the most qualified candidate. After the substantive test selection, they are the most qualified candidates, and then we would be going to the next step, that is contingent selection. So in these contingent selection process, what happens is that we get the best qualified candidate, but in these contingent selection, there are few steps, but all these steps are not necessary for all the jobs. This includes medical examination, background verification, right? Everything comes under contingent selection, drug tests. These type of tests or process is not required for all the jobs. For example, if you go for army or some government exams like SI, so we need to qualify certain, I mean, we need to have certain height, we need to have certain stamina, everything would, medical examination checkup would be coming under contingent selection. So after the contingent selection phase is done, then the applicant is offered the job, he or she receives the job offer. After receiving job offer also, you will be having certain stages. So these are the brief stages. We'll be looking into all the stages. Okay? So the selection process, first we will be starting with job analysis, wherein we would be discussing that is the role of other person, either a psychologist, can be organizational psychologist, or whoever uh, who are responsible would be deciding who are eligible, who are not, what skills are required, everything. Then comes advertisement. So in this, what happens is that we would be giving advertisement. In advertisement, we would be mentioning all the details regarding the job, what is the post of the job, who are eligible, what are the eligibility criteria, as in qualifications, educational qualifications, whether freshers are eligible or experienced are eligible. If experienced are eligible, how many months or years of experience is required, everything would be specified. What is the basic pay or the tenure, how many months it would be continuing, everything would be mentioned in the advertisement. So in which medium you wanted to be sharing, either you'd be sharing on social media platforms or LinkedIn or any job platforms, that would be decided in advertisement page, and you'd be giving the advertisement. So after the advertisement is given, what happens is that you would be moving to application space, wherein after looking at the applications, many number of candidates who feel that they are eligible, they would be giving the application, they would be sending the applications, and you will be receiving the application. So advertisement and applications comes under recruitment phase, wherein we are receiving as many applications as possible. There are no hurdles, any employee or any candidate can give applications or can send applications. Then after application phase, we would be moving to screening phase. In this screening phase, what happens is that sometimes in screening phase we can use different types of tests, but mostly we would be only screening the resumes, right? We would be getting the application forms and resumes of the candidates, wherein we would be looking whether the candidates are meeting the eligibility criteria or not. If they are meeting the eligibility criteria, they would be move forward. If not, they would be rejected in that screening phase, wherein only certain candidates would be going to the other stage and certain candidates would be rejected. Then after screening phase, we would be moving to job test or employment test. So in this phase, if there are many number of candidates, we would be going for this stage, wherein we would be giving some of the tests. For example, in organizations, right? Many IT organizations, what they do is that for after the students, when they go for placements or something, they would be giving tests. There are many different types of tests. For example, if we are talking about computer science engineering, they would be going for coding, aptitude test, etc. What all they require, they would be going for different rounds of tests. So this is IT. So when we are talking about other different types of jobs, there would be different types of tests. So these different types of tests would be dealing with it further. So after this test is done, whoever are qualified in the test, then they would be moving to interviews. So in the interviews, a qualified employer or whoever the interviewer would be taking the interview based on the type of the job and type of the organization. The type of the interview differs. Whether the interview should be uh, structured or unstructured, whether it should be formal, informal, or whether it should be behavioral interview, stress interview, everything would be based on the job and the type of the organization. Then after the interview is done, finally the candidate is selected, as in he or she is the most qualified candidate. Then we would be moving to reference checking. In this, we would be seeing who have referred the candidate, from whether they are employed previously. If they are employed, we would be calling, the organization would be calling to the previous organization and knowing the details, how is the employee as such. All the details would be the background verification. Usually background verification would be done in reference checking. Then comes medical examination. So this medical examination is not required for all the jobs. Some of the jobs would be asking for just the medical certificate from the doctor, but for some jobs like army or some other jobs, wherein they would be taking a physical exam, pilot, army, right? Some of the jobs they would be taking a medical examination then and there. From the organization side only, they would be taking the medical examination. So if the medical This is not the necessary step for all the jobs. You can skip this step for some of the jobs. Then after medical examination, then if they pass that stage, the employee would be finally selected. So after getting selected also, you would be receiving the job offer. So even after in final selection stage, what happens is that, for example, the number of posts are 50, and you have 100 candidates finally qualified for this post. So even in that 100 posts also, you would be looking for the most eligible candidates, and for them you would be sending the job offer. So when the candidate receives the job offer, is that it is the confirmation that they are eligible for this job, and the basic details of what is the basic pay, what is the pay they are offering, what is the job role, or what are the terms and condition. Everything would be mentioned in that job offer. Then comes employee contract stage. In some of the organizations, there would be contact between employee and the employer or the organization. So in this stage, it is very much important for the employee who is joining, or the candidate who would be joining the organization, to read all the terms and conditions very carefully, and only after reading everything from line to line and checking whether it is okay with them, then only they should be signing the contract or any kinds of bonds. Then after employee contract, we would be moving to evaluation phase. So the employee contract is done, then the candidate has joined the job. So in these evaluation phase, what happens is that you have heard about probation period. Heard about probation period?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So
Yes,
these evaluation come this probation period comes under evaluation stage. Even after the candidate joins the job, even in the job offer or employee contract, it is mentioned that if the candidate is able to fulfill certain criteria, if he or she is able to learn certain training skills or something, they would be retained. If not, the employer or the organization, the management has the right to remove the candidate whenever they are possible, right? So the probation period might be for 6 months or 1 year, wherein they would it is the training phase wherein the candidate is under evaluation. So after the probation period is done, if the candidate fulfills the criteria, then they would be retained. If not, then they would be terminating the candidate. So till here, this is the selection process.
Even the candidate also have a choice to leave the organization if he doesn't like it.
Yes, the candidate, sometimes the candidate has the option, because if in the employee contract, if you sign the bond of having, for example, if the organization makes you sign the bond of 2 to 3 years, wherein until 2 to 3 years you won't be having the right to leave the organization, but at the same time, if you won't fulfill the criteria or something, the management or the organization holds that power to remove you from that particular post. If there is no contract or anything, if there is no notice period to serve, then the employee can leave that job. But mostly notice period would be there in most of the jobs, when they have to serve the notice period. Only after the notice period they can leave the organization. So that is about selection process. Hope selection process is clear.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So after selection process, we have methods of selection. So these methods can be basically divided into two major types, which include tests and interviews. We have seen in the selection process, right? So tests and interviews. So these tests can be of two types: proficiency test and psychological test. And under interviews also, there are different types of interviews. First, we will be talking about tests. Okay. So when we are talking about proficiency test, we are here, the organization or the one who is taking the interview wants to measure the abilities or the skills you have already acquired, right? Already you have, the candidate would be having certain skills with him, the acquired skills. So here the organization or the management wants to test that skills, wanted to know, measure that information regarding the skills which he or she has already acquired. The proficiency of the candidate is to be tested. So under proficiency test also there are different types of tests. So in this what work sampling, in work sampling what they do is that the interviewer would ask the candidate to give example of some of his work which have already done, right? For example, any different types of projects taken up by that employee, what all he or she has done in that job, right? So the sample of the work is explained to the interviewer so that the interviewer would know what all work has been done by that particular candidate. That is about work sampling. So in that work sampling the interviewer would be able to know the knowledge regarding knowledge and skills of the employee regarding one particular skills and traits, right? So all that knowledge, right, which has already acquired would be known to the interviewer. Then comes job knowledge test. In this, what happens is that the organization itself would prepare some certain kinds of tests. So in these tests, what they would be doing is that they would be giving certain questions. Either they might be descriptive, I mean, they have to, short answers might be, or else they might be giving MCQs. That would be their choice, depending on the job. For example, if it is IT job or something, they would be giving some course which the candidate has to solve. If it is other kinds of jobs, then they might be giving MCQs in order to test your knowledge regarding that job, or descriptive statements wherein you have to answer to the questions what the organization has given. That is job knowledge test. So if you answer the questions correctly given by the organization, then they would be able to understand that you are having the knowledge which the particular job position is required for. Then comes simulation test. In these, what happens is that the organization or the one who is taking the interview, right? The interviewer would be creating a situation and would be asking you to deal with that situation. So this is not the original situation. They would be creating the situation. For example, if the interviewer wanted to know the tolerance level or how much stress the candidate can handle, so he or she, how they would be deciding decision making skills or something, he or she would be creating the situation as in they would be saying there is a fire accident in the organization wherein you are in the managerial position or the leadership position, every other employee is coming to you and they are panicking. In such situations what you would be doing? So they would be creating some certain situation, they would be asking what you'll be doing in that situation, and the candidate would be answering. So based on the answers of the candidate, the interviewer would be evaluating the candidate. So that is about simulation test. In situational test, what happens is that some real life situation would be given to them, and they would be seeing the analysis of that situation. For example, previous in the organization, real life situation has occurred, as in there might be some problem with the machinery or something. So they would be explaining that situation to that candidate and would be asking, if you were in that situation, this has already happened. Even in the future also it might happen. So if you were in that situation, what you would be doing? So that would be the candidate would be sharing his insights and inputs. Then based on that inputs, they would be evaluating the candidate. Then comes psychomotor test. In for example, for quality checks or something, dexterity test. If your hand-eye coordinations are okay, for example, if the job is related to something, you have to lift something, or you have to concentrate on something, you have to focus on something. They would be checking your psychomotor test, as in how is your hand-eye coordination, whether your motor movements are okay, whether you are able to coordinate your movements, right? Everything would be checked. So that is about psychomotor test. Then we would be moving to psychological tests. Mostly psychological tests are not required for all the type of jobs. But in today's world, these psychological tests has also been introduced in many of the organizations. mostly intelligence test won't be used by the organizations to much extent. We can say that they won't be using it only, but if they use, they would be using only in the initial stages in order to screen in the screening stage or something. They use intelligence tests, but mostly it is avoided because these intelligence would be changing from time to time, and also it would be giving only the intellectual ability, and it is also not correct to test the to take the individual based on their intelligence instead of checking them based on their job or their skills and abilities. Then comes aptitude test. Aptitude tests are mostly used wherein in these aptitude tests we have a different types of test. Aptitude test is that we are checking the ability of the individual, future ability of the individual in future. If there are any certain, in these aptitude tests, there will be many different types of tests, differential aptitude test, general aptitude test. So in these we would be having different subscales wherein it would be reasoning ability, mathematical ability, verbal ability, right, mechanical ability, clerical ability. So in one aptitude test we would be able to know different ability, different as in the ability of the individual on that particular task. We would be able to know whether the individual is good at verbal test, numerical test, reasoning, or he or she is good at mechanical abilities. We would be able to know. So based on that, we would be able to know that we can retain that particular candidate, or in order, even after after the selection also, these tests can be used in order to see to allocate these particular candidate to uh, some particular task or something. Also, we can use aptitude tests. Then comes interest test. So in these interest tests, we would be able to know the orientation of that particular candidate, in which, for example, he or she is oriented towards social. There are many different interest tests, comprehensive interest schedule, RIASEC. There are many different tests wherein we use in order to know the orientation, in which field is the candidate interested in. If he or she is not interested in this particular field, it is no use to retain that particular individual. If they have interest in this particular field which we are looking for, then we can retain that candidate, we can select that candidate. So that is interested. So personality test is the most widely used test in organizations nowadays. Even in IT firms and all, people are involving personality tests in their curriculum, wherein before screening the candidates, or in order to screen the candidates, they use personality tests in order to know the opinion on the organization, what type of personality they hold, whether they are extroverts or introverts, right? Even there are many different types of organizational scales also, wherein they would be knowing uh, work motivation, what is the motivation levels of the employee, right? So to know everything, we can use person. Yes. Any problem?
I think it was an accidental on by someone.
Okay. So we use personality tests. Some of the examples of a personality test include 16PF, 8SQ, Neo 5, right? So we use all these types of personality tests in order to, and also the organization can develop their own tests in order to, there would be organizational psychologists, if the organization have organizational psychologists, if they know psychological testing and all. So the organization can develop their own test, and they can standardize the test and use that test, and they can review, evaluate all the findings. So this is about psychological tests. Mostly psychological tests are not broadly used, but they are used to a certain extent. Then comes interviews. So interviews are of many different types. Mostly interviews are considered as a very important phase of selection, because whatever we are not able to know from the test, in test we are only checking the ability, right? What is the knowledge of the candidate, what is the ability of the candidate. We are just able to know the theoretical knowledge, and the behavior, what would be in personality test or something, we would be knowing the personality or behavior, what would be the behavior. But coming to interview, we would be able to ask the candidate whatever we want. For example, some job related questions, right? Are you willing to relocate, right? So some certain questions, these type of questions we can't be including in tests, right? So in test we are only checking their ability, knowledge, but when coming to interview we would be able to ask whatever we wanted to ask to the candidate. So there would be different types of interviews in this. So the first one we will be discussing is that structured and unstructured interview. So can anyone of you tell me what is the difference between structured and unstructured interview?
In structured, I guess, like we have some certain steps to follow, like the certain rounds to follow, as mentioned in our books, like preliminary interview or something like that.
Yes.
Unstructured are something like referral jobs. Like somebody referred that so and so person is good. So without processing all those formal steps, what generally they have to take, they will directly take on the review of reference of others.
Structured, maybe the questions are already framed and it is well planned.
Yes.
In unstructured, it may not be.
Yes. In the
Yes,
structured, yeah.
unstructured means like on the spot they will ask some questions. Structured means already prepared questions.
Yes. So in structured, what happens is that it is a very well planned interview. How many stages would be there in that particular interview? Who would be taking that interview? Who would be taking forward? How many particular individuals would be taking that particular interview? And also the questions to be asked are previously decided. So when the interviewee comes, the interviewer asks only the particular set of decided questions. He or she can't be giving some other questions because it is already formatted. It should be going in that followed format only, and it is also time bound. So how much time would this interview take place, right? Whether the interviewer would be passive or active, whether you will be giving the interviewee the chance, how much whether you want the interview to be passive or active, everything would be decided priorly only, and it would be time bound. You can't, it is not flexible enough. There is no flexibility in structured interviews. But talking about unstructured interview, in structured interviews, what happens is that there wouldn't be any bias because the questions are formatted without any bias. So there wouldn't be any bias, any subjectivity, etc. Because they are only deciding based on the questions prepared and the time taken, etc. The answers given by the candidate. In unstructured interview, what happens is that there is no particular structure. It is not time bound. The time, there is not particular time frame decided. The questions have not been decided. The participants in these unstructured interview, the next question would be based on the answer of that interview. Whatever the candidate answers, then based on that answer, the interviewer would be deciding the next question. So the questions are spontaneous in nature. So between structured and unstructured also, there is one interview called as semi-structured interview. So in these interview, there is flexibility, as in the question, some of the questions would be decided already. So after the candidate comes, if the interviewer feels that if there is need to ask some other questions also in semi-structured interview, the interviewer would be asking that particular questions also. So, which type of interview do you think would be very much effective?
Structured, ma'am, because there will be no bias. Means there will be equal opportunity will be given to everyone. But at times,
Ma'am, structured because it is very well planned and well executed.
at the same time, equal opportunities will be given, and there can be a chance of one informal means like one sudden questionnaire can be pop up between the selection. If two equal opponents are there to choose, they may rise up one more questionnaire which can be planned then and there.
Ma'am, actually, both are can be possible in a same interview. Few questions can be structured and few can be spontaneous.
That is semi-structured interview. So then we'll be moving to formal versus informal interview. So this formal and informal interview is also same as structured and unstructured, but in this formal and informal, here we are more focused on the setting. As in the interview would be conducted in the formal setting, wherein there would be particular room for that setting. Everything would be set based on interview. It is like, for example, when we are talking about informal interviews, it might be some of the interviews might be happening outside the organization in any of the cafes or something. So that is, we are morely focused on the setting of the interview where the interview is taking place. Right, the informal interview, everything would be structured, well planned. In informal interview, there would be other type of setting wherein it is not an organization. The people would be meeting outside, right? Informal communication, everything would be there in informal interviews. Then comes individual versus panel interview. So in the individual interview, what happens is that there would be only one interviewer and one interviewee. The communication takes place between only the two individuals, that is the interviewer and the interviewee. So these type of individual interviews are mostly on, for example, entry level positions, right? If we wanted to appoint candidates for entry level positions, we would be going for individual interviews. Then talking about panel interviews, in these particular panel, there would be 5 to 6 interviewers, wherein each of them would be from different departments or a different background. They would be having different backgrounds. So mostly when we are conducting panel interviews, it would be for the higher level position, as in managerial position or more higher than that, wherein individuals from different department would be present there. Every individual would be asking questions related to particular department. Here in these also, in individual interview, there might be some biases because the interviewer who might be taking the interview might hold some values and the candidate might not be according to that values. So there might be subjectivity in individual interview. But when we are talking about panel interview, right? So it is a group decision wherein even if one of the individual wants to in the panel wants to show the bias or something, the other individuals would be mostly focused on keeping it in an objective way, wherein they would be evaluating the candidate based on the answers given. So this is about panel interview. So in stress interview, what happens is that if the interviewer wants to know the tolerance level, can you please mute? Whoever is speaking, can you please mute yourself? Then talking about stress interview, right? If we wanted to know the tolerance level of the interview, so they would be giving some stressful situation, or the interviewer might be asking some difficult question in order to check the confidence level of the candidate, or how much stress tolerance level, or if the individual would be able to mic is on. You're able to see the screen, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you able to see the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So in stress interview, in order to know the confidence level, how much stress tolerance do they have, if there are any stressful situation which might be, this might be, for example, for certain jobs like when we are talking about police department and something, if there is some interviews related to that, they can use stress interview, because in order to know how they would be dealing, how much stress tolerance do they have, right? So in such situation, we use stress interview. It is not used in all the kinds of organizations or something. Whenever it is related, in order to know the tolerance level, whether the individual would be a argumentative behavior, right? So the interviewer starts arguing with the interviewer, and in order to know how much argumentative capacity the candidate holds, so everything comes under the stress interview, just to know the tolerance level of the candidate. Then comes depth interview. So in this depth interview, what we do is that, for example, this depth interview will be taking only when the candidate is from one particular field. For example, if you wanted to select a candidate for teacher job, okay, if you are selecting the candidate for history teacher or something, then you would be asking in depth the questions, as in uh, related to some historical movements, as in why did the world war take place, who has started world war one, now what is the time gap of world war one, world war two, or some other questions, when is the independent movement began, right? Who are the pioneers of that independent movement, or any other movement. You'd be asking in-depth questions related to that particular field, in order to know the knowledge of the candidate in that particular field. So in depth interview, what happens is that the interviewer who is going to take the interview should also belong to that particular field. Because if the interviewer has the knowledge related to that field only, then he or she can interview the candidate related to that one particular field. Then comes situational interview. So a hypothetical situation would be given. For example, okay. For example, if an individual wants to be a counselor or a psychologist or a therapist, they have been gone for an interview. In that interview, if you have went for the job of a counselor, right? In order to know you are a good counselor, you'll be able to counsel or something. They would be giving you a situation. For example, just imagine that a child or an individual or adult comes to you with aggressive behavior or something. He or she is very much impulsive. They would be giving some particular criteria. They would be describing the situation as a whole, and they would be asking how you would be dealing with these client. The client is aggressive, impulsive. He or she won't be listening to any one of them. So you have to deal with these kind of client. Then how you would be dealing with this type of client? So after you define which therapies you would be using, what is the method you would be following, or the procedure you would be following, everything would be analyzed. And if they feel that the method or the procedure you are following is appropriate, then the candidate would be evaluated based on that. That is about situational interview. They would be giving situation, and you would be answering based on that. Your answers, you would be evaluated. In behavioral interview, what happens is that the interviewer wants to know the previous behavior of the candidate. So this situation is already done. They would be asking, please tell us any difficult situation you have faced in your life, and what are the different coping mechanisms, or how did you cope from that difficult situation, right? So this situation has been already done in the life of that candidate. So they would be asking about the past incident, in order to know how did the candidate has behaved in that particular situation, just to know the behavior. So that is the behavioral interview. Then comes telephonic and video interview. So in this telephonic and video interview, the interview would be in means of call, as in on the telephone, wherein the interviewer would be asking you some questions and you would be answering. It is only verbal communication. Then comes video interview, wherein video chatting, as in you would be able to see the interviewer, and the interviewee would be able to see the interviewer also would be able to see the candidate, and he or she would be asking some questions or something. The candidate would be responding. Then comes walk-in interview. So when we are talking about walk-in interview, there is no prior receiving of applications or something. The candidate, whoever received the advertisement or got to know about that particular job, they would be directly walking into the interview place where the interview is conducted. They would be taking their resumes, and on the spot they would be the interviewer would be taking the resume of the candidate. They would be evaluated, and on the spot they would be able to know whether they got the job or not. So if there are many number of candidates, walk-in interview might be risky and not possible, as in the evaluation might not be well. So these are about different types of tests and different types of interviews. So these are the methods we use in selection process. Understood, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So then comes, there are some particular principles of interviewing, right? So if particular individual is in the place of an interviewer, he or she should be maintaining some ethics, some values, as in they shouldn't be going beyond some rules. There are some rules to follow. So some of them include the interviewer should be polite, punctual, and present, right? For example, he or she might not be acting disrespectful. If you are in the place of the interviewer, you shouldn't be acting rude. You should be polite enough. You have to give the space for the other candidate to talk. You should not be always active. You should be passive, and you should sometimes you should be passive, and also you should allow the candidate to talk. You should be allowing the candidate to be active, so that you would be also knowing the inputs of the candidate. An interview should not deviate from the predefined subject. So you should not be going beyond the levels of what you want. For example, if you are taking interview for a particular job, your questions should be regarding that particular job only. You should be not get deviated from that particular questions related to the interview, and you should didn't be going to some personal life questions or something which makes the uh, candidate uncomfortable. Interviewers should be persistent with the questions. As in, if you feel that the candidate is getting intimidated or something, you should be able to change the tone. But the questions you have prepared, you should be persistent with that question. You should be continuing with that question. But you should also make the candidate comfortable so that they would be able to answer to your questions. Interviewer should allow the interviewee to speak more. You should be the passive one, and the interviewee should be the active one, wherein you should be asking the questions and you should be saying quiet, wherein you have to listen to the answer or the inputs given by the candidate. Question asked should be clear and to the point. It shouldn't be getting deviated. The question should be clear, even though if the candidate, if you feel that the candidate didn't understand the question, if the candidate asks you to repeat, it is your responsibility to repeat it in a clear manner. Interviewer should be empathetic while sharing negative feedback, and it is recommended to share feedback in a constructive way. So what happens is that in many of the interviews, every for every candidate, the interview they attend is important, right? So if they didn't get selected or something, even if you wanted to reject the particular candidate, so there is some particular way in which you would be rejecting the candidate. You shouldn't be saying that you are rejected, you are not having any abilities or skills required for this job. You shouldn't be using this tone or the words, framing of words, right? So you should be using some constructive way. You should be giving the feedback in a constructive manner, right? So the interviewer has to keep this in mind, so that they have to understand the perspective of that particular individual and then share the information. So these are the some of the principles of interview. Then comes evaluation of interview, right? So do you think evaluation of interview is necessary? Do you,
Yes,
yes, right? Why so?
Only after interview evaluation we will be able to know whether the candidate is up to the criteria that we are looking for.
Yes. So
Yeah.
even yes. So after the selection criteria, after the interview is done, you have selected some of the candidates. Also, you have to evaluate the interview process because there might be many different barriers in this interview process. So if you evaluate the entire interview process only, you would be able to know if there are any barriers in this process, if there have been any barriers. If yes, how you can just eliminate these barriers or something. So some of the barriers which can be in interview process include interview process or selection process, ineffective recruitment, whether the advertisement is given in a proper way, whether the candidates who have applied for the job is under the eligibility criteria. For example, the advertisement is not good enough and there are many number of applicants who are not fulfilling the eligibility criteria, then that would be problematic, right? So you have to evaluate whether the candidates are being from the eligibility criteria or not. Everything should be taken care of. So whenever you give advertisement, it is important for you to take care of whatever you are mentioning in that advertisement. You have to mention the position, what is the basic pay, what are the skills, what are the educational qualifications. Everything should be mentioned so that ineffective recruitment won't be a problem in the selection process. Then comes perception, right? So the one who is in the place of the interviewer, right, the one who would be taking the interview would be always having good perceptional ability, wherein for example if the candidate would be giving some answer and if the interviewer would be evaluating it in another manner, I think there is perception difference, right? So if the interviewer is not able to perceive in the same way as the candidate, then that would be the miscommunication or misinformation, wherein the interviewer would be perceiving it entirely wrongly, and he or she might be also rejecting that candidate, but that particular candidate might be the best fit. So it is important for the organization to look for the interviewer who has a good perception ability skills or something, then only they have to send them for taking the interview. Then comes stereotyping. So many of the individuals would be holding many as in racial differences, gender differences. So the one who would be taking the interview might be having different types of opinion on different peoples. He or she might be holding some stereotypes in their mind. So the organization or the interviewer who is taking the interview should be careful that even if they hold certain types of stereotypes or something, they should see that that stereotypes won't be interfering in the interview process. So if these stereotypes they hold interfere the interview process, then they might be rejecting the right candidate. Our main aim is to select the right candidate for the right job. Then comes halo effect. For example, instead of judging or instead of judging, it's not we should be using judging, but instead of selecting the candidate based on their capability or something, individual would be selecting the candidate based on their physical appearance. If the interviewer feels that the physical appearance of one of the candidate is good, even though his or her capability is low, if he selects them, for example rejecting the individual because he has the capability but rejecting the individual because uh, their physical appearance is not good. So we should be more focused on it that any type of physical appearance or halo effect shouldn't be there in the interview process. And also we have discussed in our previous classes, right, when we are talking about impression management, primacy effect, recency effect, right? So some of the interviewers would be solely focusing on the, for example, in an interview, there are just think that it is a structured interview and there are 10 questions. For example, the interviewee, the candidate might not be answering the first question correctly, but he or she has answered all the next 9 questions correctly. but the interviewer would be rejecting the candidate because he or she is focusing only on the first impression, right? Only on the primary information he would be focusing, and he would be just letting go the recent information. So that is called primacy effect. It is important for us to look if there are any types of biases, misattribution bias, that is primacy effect or recency effect. In recency effect, what happens is that the most as in, for example, if the candidate has answered first 9 questions and the candidate didn't answer the 10th question, that is the most recent information which the interviewer has. So the interviewer would be rejecting the candidate based on only the 10th, the answer on the 10th question, because he or she is having the recent information regarding that part. So we should be careful, or the interviewer who is taking the interview should be careful that there is no biases like halo effect, primacy effect, recency effect, and the interview is conducted in a fair and appropriate manner. Then comes quota system. Sometimes what happens is that there are also few jobs which are based on category, right? Based on category, as in only category or gender. For example, for this particular job, only females are eligible. For this particular job, only certain category people are eligible. So in these, what happens is that this is based on quota system. So when it is based on quota system, for example, the most eligible candidates might be from other category or other gender, right? So we should be looking into even that also. We should be eliminating all of this in order to get the best fit for the best job, right? Best candidate for the best job. So that is the primary role of the human resource HR department or something. They would be looking at all of this. It is the responsibility of the organization, the who is taking the interview, to carry out the interview in a fair and appropriate manner without any biases, without any subjective. Understood, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. But the thing is, what you're teaching is not in the reader. Like, it's very brief and very informative. And good thing is you are sharing the PPT, so it's very easy for us to understand and everything. But the thing what you have covered is not listed in our material supplied from the university.
But you have the material, right? Or what to be read and all?
Yes, yes, we have the material, but the things which you have covered is very like in detail, and the PPT is also very helpful. So thank.
Because you're sharing PPT, we are able to connect to the topic now.
Yes, because
Put
what
up
you're
in
teaching is
the-
not listed in our books.
You explained in detail, madam, which is concised in the text too.
Ma'am, is it possible to share PPT in our group?
Actually, I have shared the PPT with one of your classmates. He has told me that he would be sharing it, but some of them told that you didn't receive the PPT. So
Yes,
I have
ma'am.
shared the PPTs in the chat box. You can go and look it for there.
All the
Look in the
PPTs,
chat.
ma'am.
Yeah, yeah.
All.
The last 4 classes, I have shared the PPTs in the chat box. Please look into it.
Thank you, ma'am.
So after
Can you please share your
tomorrow,
number?
yes,
Can you please share your number?
in this live class.
You can type in the chat, ma'am. That cannot be visible to anyone.
Yeah, it would be great.
Okay, after the class, I would be giving my number. But now with the interview, the methods, the process is clear, right?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Very clear.
Yes, ma'am.
Very nice. Very clear.
Very clear.
So much, ma'am. Very clear.
Yeah.
We'll conduct
So,
interviews.
okay. So now we will be moving to the other topic. Okay. That is training and development programs. So tell me, do you think training is important? Because after selection, you are selecting the right candidate, right? You are selecting the right candidate, you are evaluating their skills and everything. So after selecting the right candidate, I mean the best candidate for the best job, why do you think training is important?
Yes,
Training
it is
required
important, ma'am.
to place in a proper.
Training is required, ma'am.
Training
Because
is
even
required.
though they are good
No,
candidates,
every
As per
organization have the different ways of working. So wherever you're working, they have to give training for the smooth flow of the work and everything, I guess.
suitability to the placement, justification for that. Some training is needed.
What happens is that even though the organization, after so much of elongated selection process also, the organization select the competent employee, but after a period of time, right, for example after 6 months, the employee won't be that much competent, because there are new technologies coming up, or else the technology, the structure of the organization or anything is changing, right? So whenever there is a change, it is important for the employee to change with the time, to develop with the time. So in order to
yes,
develop, yes,
yes.
yes, in order to develop, training is important. So these training is short term, right? Training is short term process wherein it might be for 6 months, 3 months, 1 year. But when we are talking about development, right? Development is very long term process, right? We need to, for example, when we are talking about the development of an individual, not biological or physical development, but the development in a particular job, right? Development of your skills and ability. So these development we can compare it to self actualization, right? Wherein reaching to your maximum potential, even after reaching to our maximum potential also, there will be something we need to achieve. So that is what development. So even if you reach your highest potential in your development process also, there will be something you can learn and develop yourself, right? So development is the long term process, whereas training is the short term process. Let us see. So, training is an act or process which helps in the increasing the knowledge and skills of the employees to perform effectively. For example, you see that there is a difference between the performance, expected performance, and the actual performance of the employee. As in, there is a gap between expected performance and the actual performance. In order to make the actual performance of the employee the expected performance, you can give training. So whenever you give training, this is the act or process wherein which improves the skills and abilities of the individuals, right? So that it can make the individuals perform better. Then comes, why is training important? What is the significance of training? Right, so it helps us in using human resources effectively. So there is the department in the organizations, right? So these HR departments are concerned with our training, development, recruitment, selection, all these process. So in order to use this human resource department effectively, training is one of the means. Training helps in improving job effectiveness and performance efficiency. So after getting trained, or something in your organization is providing some training, it would be helping you to do effective job, and also it would improve your performance, wherein you would be performing better than earlier. It improves skills and knowledge of the employees. With the training, you can develop new skills, new abilities, and also you would gain new knowledge. It facilitates learning culture in organization. So when these type of training programs have been initiated or being conducted continuously, so learning culture is being developed in the organization. It enhances the chance of building good employees with good competency. As in, if you give training programs, provide training programs, then the competent employee, once the technology changes, would not be that competent. But if you are giving the training, then that employee would become competent enough again. It fosters positive feeling about organization. If you know that as the technology is changing, time is changing, you are lacking your skills, you know that you are lacking the skills, but at the same time you know that your organization is giving training programs or something wherein you can develop your skills and everything, you would be having good feeling towards your organization, right? Because instead of focusing only on the performance or the productivity, they're also focusing on improving your skills. So you'll be having some positive feeling towards the organization. It helps in creating healthy work life balance and healthy work environment. So when you are competent enough, you are having enough skills because of the training, it would be easy for you to maintain work life balance. As in, if you don't have enough skills or something, you will be carrying your work to your home, because in the office you are not able to complete your role or something, then you would be taking that work to your home, wherein your work life balance would be disturbed. Due to these training programs or something, you would be learning skills how to do what to do in an efficient way and in easier way, right? So you would be able to maintain work life balance. And also training helps in preventing conflict and to improve safety. Training is not only about only skills related to that particular job, but also training can be regarding conflict management, interpersonal skills, communication skills, team in how to behave in a group, etc. Training can be of anything, right? So it also helps one way in order to prevent conflict. It improves morale of workforce, as in you are getting trained, you are getting new skills, new knowledge as the time is going on. You are also getting developed. Your personal growth is also in the same way, right? So it improves your morale, your confidence would be increased, your enthusiasm, your activeness would be increased due to the training programs. Training enhances growth and development. Because of the training practices programs, there would be personal growth and also organizational growth. Personal growth in terms of learning skills and knowledge, organizational growth in terms of productivity, right? Did you understand the significance of training?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Then comes types of training. So there are different types of training, not only the trainings mentioned here, there are also many other trainings which the organization would be giving. That would be dependent on the organization and the type of job, the structure of the organization, etc. But the main types we would be discussing now. One is basic skills. So in basic skills, what happens is that in some of the organization, for example, manufacturing unit or something, uh, wherein there is no need of writing, reading or something. In particular kind of jobs, there is no need of writing, reading, etc. But what the organization realizes is that after a particular point of time, they are recruited even without testing their basic skills, what are their reading ability, writing ability. They just recruited because they thought that it is not necessary. They would be just carrying the weights or just looking at the material. They would be carrying weights. What is the need of reading or writing? But after a particular point of time, they realize that even for these employees, in order to carry this or something, they have to count the number of blocks or something in order to come. Yes. Any problem?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am, it could be an accidental glitch.
Okay. In order to count the number of blocks or just to read whatever, just simple words, also it is difficult for the employees, even though it is not necessary. But the organization feels that it might be useful if they learn some of the basic reading and writing abilities. It would be useful. Some mathematical abilities, it would be useful for the employees. In such situation, what they feel is that they would be bringing one of the trainer in order to train their employees. Just the basic skills, reading, writing, vocabulary, mathematics, etc. That comes under basic skills. These we are not talking about professional jobs or something. When we are talking about basic skills, it's not about professional jobs, but it is about jobs which recruit people not based on literacy or something. The other basic skills can also be the communication skills, interpersonal skills, wherein even in the professional, wherein even the literates can take the training for these basic skills like communication, interpersonal skills, etc. Then comes technical skills. When we are talking about the technical skills, we are talking about the for example, if you are into manufacturing company or you are working with machines or something, it is important for you to know the technicality of that particular machine, how it works, what are the skills involved in it, right? So, for example, if that particular machinery is removed or the new machine has come in that place, then the organization have to take initiative and they have to give some training programs in order to make the employees learn the new technical skills. For example, when we are talking about IT companies or something, when they are in their colleges, they would be learning some different type of languages like Python, Java, and after a few they have been recruited. It's been 1 month they have been recruited, and after that new technology or a new language has come up, new programming language has come up, wherein the employees are not good enough in that particular language. So what the organization would be doing is that they would be teaching that technical skills, that programming language, so that the employees become efficient. And also most of the companies in software companies, talking about software companies, are tying up with the institutions wherein they would be generally going for placements, and they are ensuring that the students would be given important courses on technical skills. The student would be learning technical skills so that the organizations can take them or place them in their organizations. Then comes problem solving skills. So some of the organizations would also be holding or giving training programs on problem solving skills, wherein they would be bringing the employees, everyone at a time, and they would be giving certain problems, and they would be asking them to brainstorm, as in whatever ideas come to their mind, the trainer would be asking the employees to think and analyze the problem and see what are the solutions which can be used to solve this problem, so that giving imaginary problems and situational problems, hypothetical situations, it would enhance the problem solving skills of the employees. That is problem solving skills training. Then comes interpersonal skills training. Sometimes what happens is that the employees productivity is good, the organization is flourishing, but due to the interpersonal conflict, or the members in the organization are not cordial with each other, then it would also lead to less job satisfaction, low morale of the employees. There would be no enthusiasm, because what happens, no confidence, no enthusiasm, they doesn't want to come to office because they don't have good interpersonal relationship, they don't have cordial relationship, coordinating relationship with their other colleagues. So in such situations, what happens, the organization would be um, these training programs, when we are talking about problem solving skills and interpersonal skills, it might be for 2 to 3 days, right? Two workshops, generally we can call them as workshops wherein they would be giving how to be cordial with each other, and also there would be some activities wherein the trainer would be giving, so that which can develop trust exercises, ice breaking exercises, wherein each other can have interaction between members of the organization. So through that, the trainer would be able to develop interpersonal relationship between the members of the organization. Then comes civility training. So in organizations, what happens is that mostly some would be in the higher hierarchy and the others would be in the lower hierarchy, and also some would be bullying other, one individual would be bullying others, there would be peer pressure or something, colleagues pressure, right? So in order to this bullying behavior, dominant behavior, wherein the civility, as in how to behave, the or good behavior, if the good behavior is being compromised in the organization premises, in such situations the organization can give civility training, wherein these type of training consists how to behave, what type of behavior should be there in an organization premises, how to decrease bullying and all these skills would be trained in civility training, how to decrease bullying, dominant behavior, how good behavior can be enhanced, everything would be included in civility training. Then comes ethics training. So in these ethics training, what happens is that mostly every individual would be having their own values, they would be working based on their values. So there are two types of views on this ethic training. Some of the people view that people already have inbuilt moral values, and these moral values can't be learned. And the other view is that even though people have the moral values inbuilt, they can also develop the moral values, or they can change their moral values, so that even though if you give ethics training also, it would be useful, it would be enhancing the ethics of the individual, but it won't be demotivating. So ethics training, in order which way to follow, which path to follow, what are the moral values to hold. For example, genuinity, confidentiality, secrecy. Information should be maintained secretly. Whatever information regarding the organization, it should be kept confidential, right? So all these ethics training would be given in ethics training. Understood types of training? Any doubts in types of training?
No.
So shall we stop here? It's 8 minutes. Anyways, we need time for the next topic. Let's stop here. You wanted to review any of the slides or any doubts in the previous slide?
Just review, ma'am, all the slides.
Yes, ma'am.
So this is the difference between recruitment and selection.
Yes.
Then this is the stages, how the stages goes on: initial selection, substantive selection, contingent selection. Under these stages only comes all of the we have discussed in this stage, right? So these application and the screening comes under initial selection stage. This job test and interviews comes under substantive interview stage. Reference checking, medical examination, final selection comes under contingent selection stage. That is the reason I have highlighted them with different colors, because they comes under different stages. Then methods of selection, wherein tests and interviews are the most important methods. Then tests are divided into proficiency test and psychological test. And the interviews, there are many different kinds of the interviews based on the type of the job and the organization. It is up to the organization and the interviewer to use which type of interview.
Ma'am, in this selection process, the personalities of the person whom we are selecting is important.
Personality, yes. For example, whether it is important or not, it is dependent on the type of job and the type of organization. For example, if you wanted to select a counselor or a therapist, some of the organizations might want the therapist with the extrovert behavior or something, so they would be giving extroversion introversion skill in order to know whether the counselor is extrovert or introvert. If they might feel that if the counselor herself or himself is the introvert, they might not be able to speak well with the clients. So in such in different types of jobs, for example, even in the organization setting, software setting also, mostly nowadays personality test has been introduced in order to know the basic personality of the employees.
Ma'am, could you elaborate on this personality job fit theory?
Personality
Job fit theory.
job fit theory. It is we can't decide whether a certain type of personality would be best fit for the certain types of jobs, right? Because we know that personality might be same, behavior would be changing, but when we are considering about behavior personality, right, it is the most prominent behavior of an individual. As we know, behavior would be changing from situation to situation, but when we are considering about personality, we are mostly considering the most prominent behavior. For example, the person who is calm, when we are terming the individual as calm personality, in most of the situations they would be calm, but there would be certain situations they might be aggressive or something. When we are talking about different types of jobs, right, so certain jobs need extrovert characteristics, and certain jobs definitely need extrovert characteristic. For example, if you are in a leadership position, you are selecting for a leader. You want a leader for that particular team. So out of that team members, you can give personality tests, right? So there are many different personality tests, 16 PF, wherein you would be getting individuals' personality traits on that 16 factors where they would be falling. So based on that factors, you can decide whether these individual might be able to Neo 5, wherein ocean, right? On that five particular traits, whether he or she would be high or low, we would be able to know. So based on that, the organization can decide whether the particular personality can fit into that particular type of job or not. But mostly they would be giving personality tests even in IT firms also, but we don't know whether they would be considering it or not.
And this will do practically also, ma'am, like in the practicals also this is applicable?
No, as in your practicals?
Yes.
Yes. So when we are
Do
talking
you
about
have any instrument or any questionnaire like last we did in the first year?
yes, you will be having different questionnaires. Whatever you are dealing in your theory, right? Whatever topics you are dealing in your theory, there would also be some personality questions, some aptitude tests, some interest inventories, wherein you would be having exposure to that different types of questionnaires in your practicals.
Okay. And in the PPT which you have shared, you have also listed the test, like some test, personality test, which you mentioned in your conversation. It's also mentioned in the PPT, like some short forms you're using for the test.
No, I didn't mention them because even the organization can develop their own tests, right? So they shouldn't be using only these particular type of tests because there are many different types of personality tests. They can use their own personality test according to their own understanding and something. They can develop their own test.
Just for our info, like what all test can be there, like can an organization take? Just for our information, can we have a PPT on that also, so that we will have an idea like what all tests are there in the market or in the system? So
Actually, in order to know the tests, you are having your practical. In your syllabus, there would be practical syllabus also, right?
yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
In
go through.
that you have different types of tests. What are the different interest inventories? What are the different personality inventories? In your practicals, it is mentioned in that syllabus. You can go through it.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
And also, I just wanted to tell you if there are any students from Nizam College Study Center. I think you have already received your practical schedule in your group, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So if you know any of your friends, please do let them know that from the upcoming Monday there would be practical sessions in Nizam College Study Center, so that nobody would be missing it.
Yes, ma'am. Everybody got their dates. According to the dates, they have been segregated.
You will be there, madam?
Our batch is from 9th July.
From Monday, I am there.
Yes, in Nizam, whoever is in Nizam College Study Center, I would be one of the resource person there. So
Okay,
just
thank
to
you.
let you know that the practicals are starting from Monday, I'm just telling you to inform your friends.
Hmm.
So no
Thank
doubts,
you.
right? Clear with this class?
Yes, madam. Your number.
Yes.
Yeah, sure, right? This won't be live streamed.
No, ma'am, because we have all other faculties members except your member. Or else, if you have such kind of thing, I will share my number.
It's
You
okay.
can
I
text
have
me.
shared my number in the chat box. Yes. So it's already time. If there is anything, we'll discuss tomorrow. Okay? Is that okay with you all?
Yes, ma'am. And just to
Thank you.
inform you, your number is like streaming on the screen, so everyone can see, I guess. If it's okay for you, it's fine.
It's okay. I have already shared it, right?
Yes, yes.
Thank you, everyone. See you all tomorrow.
Thank you, ma'am. Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Eight nine 7866.
Please, this is live stream. Make a note. Let us note.
7440.
I think we did not receive today's PDF.